area that leads to so many UFO sightings.
There in the clearing is this huge spherical machine that's hovering above the ground.
This is the only example of a UFO-related incident that actually led to a criminal investigation.
These were the real-life X-Files.
Their body still seems to be asleep, but their mind still seems to be awake.
It seems like one of the most terrifying dreams you can imagine.
People from multiple cultures report seeing some kind of ghost or apparition or even monsters or demons.
The idea that dreams can kill is something that is recorded going back millennia.
These stones are believed to hold ancient magic.
One of them contains a curse. Touching the stone could spell disaster.
The wind blows, his clothes get caught on fire.
Could this have been the Bjorkatorp curse at work?
It's a still summer's night, and the rural landscape of West Lothian, Scotland, is cloaked in darkness. Locals Gary Wood and Colin Wright cruise down the quiet road when a strange spectacle suddenly brings their car to a screeching halt. Just ahead, spanning the width of the road, is a bizarre disc-like aberration suspended in the night sky.
The two men claim that the vehicle was made up of black metallic metal and there were absolutely no windows.
The object hovers low to the ground and begins to eerily glide its way towards the car. In a panic, Gary rushes to lock his door and guns his foot to the ground. But before they can escape, the craft engulfs the men in a beam of shimmering light. Then, everything falls to black.
Was it military? Was it extraterrestrial? Was it something from beyond?
Scotland is a country steeped in mystery. Its enchanting mountains, mist-laden lochs, and rolling hills of green harbour a history rich in enigmatic lore.
Scotland comes with so many stories and a lot of tales surrounding the supernatural.
It has stories of course, the Loch Ness Monster, and tons of ghost stories as well.
Among these storied lands, there is one region that stands above the rest, a place where tales of strange spectacles are not rooted merely in folklore, but backed by documented encounters. Known as the Falkirk Triangle, odd phenomena in this geographical zone attract visitors from around the world and seemingly beyond.
The Falkirk Triangle has counted for hundreds of claimed sightings of UFOs.
It's probably the hottest spot for UFO sightings in the whole world.
Situated in the lowlands of central Scotland, the Falkirk Triangle traces its rough boundaries between the cities of Stirling, Glasgow and Edinburgh. And situated somewhat in the centre is the town of Falkirk, giving it its name. Since the late 1970s, its skies have become a crossroads of the unexplained, the high-activity hub for unidentified flying objects.
Our semantic knowledge for UFOs are coming from mainstream media. And so in that sense, UFOs are alien ships. They are visitors from another planet. They're not just simply something that we can't identify that happens to be flying around.
The epicenter of this cosmic theatre is the small and unassuming town of Bonnybridge, where it's been estimated that more than half of the town's population has glimpsed a UFO at least once in their lifetime.
Hundreds of reports have occurred in this small town in Scotland. Why is this region jinxed with this strange phenomena?
The phenomenon has bestowed upon Bonnybridge a peculiar title, Scotland's very own Roswell.
Roswell, New Mexico, in paranormal lore, is a hotbed for UFO sightings. It all began in 1947.
There was a crash in Roswell, New Mexico, witnessed by a number of people, and the police were called out and the army as well. And the crash itself was first claimed to be a downed spaceship. It was eventually dismissed by the army and the government as a weather balloon.
And from that time forward, even though they discovered that it actually came from this weather balloon, it became a place of conspiracy theories, and other theories of alien visitation became associated with.
In the decades following the Roswell incident, UFO enthusiasts have studied reported crash sites and pored over government records of extraterrestrial existence. Across the Atlantic, a similar fate has played out in Scotland, and it all began in 1979. It's a chilly November morning when 61-year-old forester Bob Taylor is conducting a routine site inspection in a densely wooded area known as Deckmont Law. His dog trails closely behind him as he nears a vast clearing, expecting to find nothing more than a few stray sheep grazing. But as he stumbles out of the bush, what he discovers defies all expectations.
There in the clearing is this huge spherical machine that's hovering above the ground. It measures about 12 feet high and 20 feet wide, and it has this metallic gray, almost sandpaper finish to it.
Awestruck by the ominous sight, Taylor cautiously approaches the vessel to investigate. Suddenly, it drops to the ground and releases a smaller spherical object decorated with a series of protruding spikes.
Taylor later described these as looking like old naval mines.
The round objects roll across the clearing towards Taylor, emanating a loud suction cup-like sound that echoes through the trees. Frozen in fear, the startled forester is unable to run before the creatures attach their spikes to his clothing and begin to drag him to the mothership. A hissing sound, followed by a nauseating odour, permeates the air. Struggling to break free, Taylor descends into a coughing fit before he abruptly loses consciousness.
Bob Taylor wakes up with a pounding headache and hearing his dog barking loudly. He's still in the clearing, but the aircraft has disappeared.
Taylor is unable to speak or walk. In fact, he has to crawl back to his truck. But when he gets there, the truck won't start. So he actually has to make this arduous journey back home, which is a mile away.
Taylor's wife is shook up by her husband's disheveled look, so much so that she calls the police.
The police are very quick to respond and come and investigate, and it's based off of his reputation.
He was regarded as an honest, trustworthy individual. So the community was understandably concerned, and the authorities took very seriously what he was saying.
Taylor's curious claims spark a police inquiry that shuts the clearing for investigation. On site, authorities are shocked to find massive prints in the ground where the supposed spacecraft was said to have landed.
They also couldn't find any evidence of what would have caused it. There were no tracks leading from it in one direction or another.
His trousers had been badly ripped by some kind of hook-like implement which had torn upwards. In fact, his trousers were sent for forensic analysis.
In the months following the ordeal, several other residents in the area come forward claiming to have seen an unusual ship in the sky on or around the night of Taylor's encounter.
Could the locals have seen the same craft?
The police were unable to find any kind of explanation for this, and so the case itself was filed away as assault by person or persons unknown.
This is the only example in British history of a UFO-related incident that actually led to a criminal investigation by the police.
The Falkirk Triangle remains relatively quiet for the following decade. It's not until 1992 that UFOs appear to make an alarming return. Local businessman James Walker is driving home to Bonnybridge after a long day's work. It's late and in the dead of winter. The sun has long disappeared as Walker nears the town. his gaze is drawn to a star-shaped constellation that seems out of place in the night sky. Suddenly, the lights begin to morph before his very eyes. Within moments, the luminous cluster dances through the sky and reassembles itself into a towering triangle positioned directly above his path home.
When James Walker is seeing these lights in the sky, what could be happening here is that we try to make sense of the world around us with our own experience. And so we'll put it together to make up shapes. When he's looking at all of these lights, his mind is making up the shapes that would be described by those lights. And so it's making up something that's not there.
However, for James, this seems very real, and he pulls off the road, too nervous to drive below its shadow, when without warning, it vanishes into the night at an incomprehensible speed.
Once he comes forward with this information, it sort of opens the floodgates for all kinds of people to start coming forward and saying they've seen these lights or they've had actual interactions with aliens.
The swell of eyewitness accounts is so extraordinary that a regional UFO hotline is established by Stirling University to log case reports of aerial abnormalities.
The people who are coming forward in Bonnie Bridge, telling their own stories, are adding to and building on a sense of almost communal mass hysteria. For those folks who truly believe they too have seen something, they might feel that it was now safe because Walker's story, of course, corroborates that much earlier one of Taylor's and suggests that there is something going on here that's a bigger pattern.
The frenzy of spine-chilling reports has many wondering if Bonnie Bridge has fallen victim to a celestial jinx.
You can imagine many people would have felt with these waves of reports that they were actually being besieged by extraterrestrial activity.
In the 90s, some of that alien craze may just be because we're seeing more sci-fi hitting mainstream media, more in the common movies and television shows than ever before. It was on everybody's agenda and mind.
But in the Falkirk Triangle, this curiosity resonates beyond the screen.
Why Falkirk Triangle? And why Bonnie Bridge? What is it about this area that leads to so many of these so-called UFO sightings?
Paranormal investigators, concerned citizens, and skeptics alike converge to hypothesize an explanation. Some suspect the strange happenings are results of covert military air experiments. A local councillor named Billy Buchanan sees it his civil duty to uncover the truth, and so begins his crusade for government action. Buchanan calls for a town meeting on the matter, and even takes his demands to London to request a national inquiry directly from the Prime Minister's office. But he is rejected and told by a local member of Parliament to walk away.
The funny thing is, if the government comes out and says, no, we don't have a secret vehicle like that, there's a portion of the people who believe in the conspiracy who will actually take that as evidence that it's there, because the more the military or the government denies it, the more you will take that as positive evidence. So in either case, saying no doesn't actually help the government because the conspiracies continue.
The gap in this theory grows yet again when researchers unearth a crucial document detailing one of the oldest unexplained UFO reports in Scottish history.
There was a note discovered in the archives of the Annual Register of 1767 that describes eyewitness accounts of some anomaly over the town of Blairgowrie.
An uncommon phenomenon was observed, preceded by a thick, dark smoke, which soon dispelled and discovered a large luminous body like a house on fire. A man riding along the high road was so stunned that he fell as to remain senseless a considerable time.
It's so interesting to see the similarities between reports made in 1767 and by James Walker. Both accounts describe this structure in the sky.
In 1767, the hot air balloon hadn't even been invented, let alone a strange aircraft. Not only does this account detail a sighting, it details an interaction between an otherworldly object and a man on the ground.
This encounter from 1770 could potentially be connected to other modern sightings in Scotland. Moments after blacking out in the shimmering light of a mysterious aircraft, Gary Wood and Colin Wright awaken behind the wheel. The dark, windowless object is nowhere to be seen. The men look at each other in a daze of shared confusion, unable to fully fathom what has just transpired. It's not until after they've arrived at their friend's home that they realise something is terribly amiss.
When they arrive at their friend's house, what really is jarring is that a journey that should only have taken 30 minutes has actually taken something like 2 hours, but they can't account for that time. They simply don't know what happened.
The event takes a harsh toll on both men in the weeks following as they grapple with grueling insomnia, coupled with severe fatigue and anxiety. When they do manage to fall asleep, their dreams are full of distressing visions. The men are desperate for relief, but even more so for an explanation. That night on a road out of Edinburgh holds a mystery. The answer, they soon discover, may reside deep within an uncharted territory of their subconscious mind.
When there are traumatic events, sometimes you don't remember them, and Sigmund Freud pushed this forward as a theory of repressed trauma, that you want to actively suppress memories of bad situations because that is the best way for a fragile mind to handle it.
Gary and Colin choose to work with a hypnotherapist to try and connect to the memories of this time that they're saying they've lost.
Under hypnosis, the men recall sitting in the car, surrounded by small humanoid creatures. Colin is loaded onto a levitating stretcher and guided aboard the windowless ship, the inside of which is illuminated by mystifying light. Meanwhile, Gary is forced out of the vehicle, where he's subjected to seizing bouts of pain akin to electric shocks.
Whether this kind of use for hypnotherapy is reliable for evidence is something that has been heavily debated, because dreams don't tend to come out as clear negatives to begin with. And so it's hard to know whether these are actual memories that are being retrieved or whether we're actually dealing with dreams which are interpretive.
In a series of succinct flashes, the men each resurface in a circular room, where tall, pale grey beings strip them of their clothes and physically examine their bodies with an array of foreign instruments.
Gary recalls that he was telepathically communicating with these otherworldly figures and was told that they were looking for sanctuary. The beings also tell Gary that while humans are advanced, they are capped. It's a statement that has puzzled researchers ever since.
Gary and Colin emerge from their sessions with very similar, eerily similar, and detailed accounts. But why them?
The problem with hypnosis is that it's leading. So your hypnotherapist is leading with questions.
And so you've got the competition between trying to bring back repressed memories and the possibility that you're creating false memories for something that never happened based on how you bring people through the memory one step at a time.
A few years after the incident, Gary and Colin pass a televised polygraph test that confirms their belief in the experience. Their saga goes down in the history of Falkirk Triangle as the first potential abduction case, and is a prelude for plenty of others that will follow. The extraterrestrial encounters that unfolded in the Scottish lowlands throughout the 90s spills over into the new millennium, with tourists and UFO enthusiasts flocking to Falkirk every year since.
There's no doubt that the Falkirk Triangle and those who've experienced UFO sightings has attracted a lot of tourists to the area, but it's also attracted a lot of derision, a lot of skepticism from people who just say that this is a ruse.
The more that people come out and feel comfortable to tell their stories within the Bonnie Bridge community because it's acceptable to say so, the more other places that are more skeptical are going to see it as, a negative, as, something to potentially make fun of or laugh about.
It's not until the year 2012 when the UK's Ministry of Defence declassifies a series of secret documents that have many changing their tune. It includes a 2-page report titled Unexplained Aerial Sighting, which details the evidence from Gary and Colin's abduction, among many others.
These were the real-life X-Files. Finally, these experiences were credible enough to be of interest to the government.
We are today experiencing something of a renaissance in UFO sightings. And the fact that a government would be interested lends validity into this phenomenon.
The answers perhaps linger just beyond our reach, where they wait for those who dared gaze up into the infinite expanse above.
The Falkirk Triangle beckons visitors to look up in the sky and see for themselves that the truth is really out there.
It's the middle of the night, and you awaken to a strange sound. Heavy footprints thundering down the hallway. Chilling unease washes over you as you suddenly realize that your body refuses to respond. Your eyes frantically dart around the room until you see the shadowy silhouette of a figure hovering in the doorway. Your bed creaks below you as the figure slowly climbs the blanket and violently collapses its weight onto your chest, suffocating your motionless body for what seems like hours. Then finally, a release sends you gasping into the dawn.
This is a nightmare which has cursed people around the world, across all cultures, and has haunted us for over a millennia. Is it simply a fragment of our imagination? Or could it be something more sinister? And more importantly, how do we escape it?
For many, surrendering to the dream world is a dreadful undertaking, one that holds the body hostage while the mind prays for escape.
This is a truly terrifying phenomenon. The body is temporarily suspended while the mind is fully awake.
This threshold invites a plethora of eerie sensations. Those affected often report hearing things that aren't there, out-of-body experiences, and a general ambience of despair.
It seems like one of the most terrifying dreams you can imagine.
You yourself are powerless. You are trapped. You cannot move. You cannot even scream.
Their body still seems to be asleep, but their mind, their senses still seem to be awake. And that gives them this kind of interface between the sleeping world and the waking world.
For many, the distressing circumstances of the nightmare don't end here, because it's during this time, while trapped in a prison of flesh and bone, that the horrid night visitor will strike.
Many people experience a presence or even an attack from this otherworldly being while in this transitional state, this nightmare.
This supernatural night visitor can appear in different forms. Some people claim to see a strange old woman, or even a doppelganger of themselves.
People have been known to wake up from these nightmares with physical marks on their bodies, be it scratches, redness, bruising. This is something that seems to occur across a wide spectrum of the population.
The idea that dreams can kill, that nightmares can kill, is something that's not new to the modern period. This is recorded going back millennia.
Manifestations of the night visitors stretch back as far as the 2nd millennium BC, when the ancient Sumerians of Mesopotamia wrote about a she-demon called Lilith.
Lilith is this terrifying female demon who we see cropping up over and over again in Middle Eastern religions, going right back to the Sumerian civilization.
A female demon who invades and penetrates the dreams of Sumerian kings in order to produce demonic children with them.
People in a number of places where there are Lilith stories try to protect themselves with various magical and superstitious items.
Since these ancient accounts, and perhaps even before, tales of a spirit that disturbs the slumbering have plagued every corner of the globe. In Japan, the phenomenon is called kanashibari. Its literal meaning, to be bound. In Hungary, it's known as bőrszokányi nyomás, translating to being pressed on. Eastern Canadians describe it as agrog, or old hag syndrome.
The very name nightmare itself comes from the word mara.
The Old English word Mara is specifically an old female sort of demonic figure that was assumed to invade people's homes and press down on them and attempt to smother them.
People from multiple cultures report seeing almost always some kind of ghost or apparition or even monsters or demons.
In St. Lucia, there's the kokma, the souls of unbaptized children, that strangle citizens in their sleep.
In parts of the Middle East, they believe that a jinn or a genie possesses individuals. In Italy and Brazil, a witch-like figure is responsible for nightly attacks.
No one knows how the night visitor picks its victims. Some say that bad behaviour can beckon its call. Others claim it to be a vengeful spirit that's possessive of certain spaces.
One quality they all share is they're rooted in a conception of evil or doing harm.
It is intriguing that the night visitor is often rooted in some kind of religious belief.
Before we understood the scientific background for these nightmares, the only explanation was the supernatural.
The belief in the occult origins of the nightmare was so deeply ingrained that it may have culminated in one of the most notorious legal spectacles in the history of the Western world. It's June 1692 in colonial America, and Richard Coman steps before a grand jury in Salem, Massachusetts, to deliver a spine-chilling testimony against his neighbour, Bridget Bishop.
Bridget Bishop was a local woman who ran 2 taverns in the town with her husband.
She is someone who doesn't necessarily fall into that sort of Puritan idea of dressing in darker colors and being demure. She likes red and she likes bright colors, and she wears them. And so, of course, this kind of labels her as somewhat of a heretic per se, someone who might be in league with the devil.
It's not surprising that her name was one of the first to come up once accusations of witchcraft started floating around.
Several accusers take the stand to claim themselves cursed by Bishop's bewitching ways. Richard Coman, a local tailor, recounts an incident when one night, while laying awake next to his sleeping wife, the curtain at the foot of their bed suddenly parted to reveal Bridget Bishop dressed in her recognizable red bodice. She slowly approached before pressing upon Coman's chest so harshly that he could not speak nor stir. The following night, Bishop appeared once more, this time grabbing a hold of Coman's throat and nearly hauling him to the ground.
In Coman's testimony, we see the symptoms of this widely experienced nightmare. A figure appears at night, putting pressure on the individual's chest. Why in this case is the entity specific? Why Bridget?
Salem at this time is absolutely in the throes of a panic about witchcraft. Those rumored to be witches were among the most feared in Salem at the time. So this is perhaps why the entity took the shape of a particular person, in this case, Bishop.
He sees this night visitor as a witch and as Bridget, potentially because of all the hysteria around witches.
Coman's tale of a troubled slumber is backed by other folks in town, effectively sending Bridget Bishop to her death on June 10th, 1692. Her hanging marks the first execution of the infamous Salem witch trials, but certainly not the last. Several other women of Salem are accused of similar nightly assaults and soon follow Bishop to the grave.
Residents of Salem believe the entity to be the devil, but is there a more plausible explanation?
Likely unbeknownst to the people of Salem, a Dutch physician had tried to explain this enigma nearly 3 decades prior. In 1664, Dr. Diemerbroek documented the case study of a female patient suffering from what she claimed to be recurring forays with Satan. He wrote, "The devil lay upon her and held her down, and when she endeavoured to throw off the burthen, she was not able to stir her members."
His advice didn't refer to religion or superstition. It was very rational. It was simply about improving diet, changing sleep positions, the kind of advice that might be given by a doctor today. But in the 1660s, this was groundbreaking.
Today, this cursed dream is best known as sleep paralysis.
In scientific terms, sleep paralysis is essentially a malfunction during the sleeping cycle.
When you fall asleep, you actually have 2 different systems. And one system locks down your motor control, so it keeps you from moving. The other system starts off by locking down your mental control, so your brain goes into a rest state. In later stages, that second system turns off again, which is when you start dreaming. And so your brain activity goes up again, your eyes start moving around rapidly. We call this REM sleep. Yet when you're having those dreams, your body is still being paralyzed by its own system.
Although estimates vary greatly, it's believed that anywhere between 8 and 50% of people have experienced sleep paralysis at least once in their life. And for 5 to 10% of the unlucky victims, it's a recurring ordeal.
Even if the truth of those numbers is estimated towards the lower end, that's still roughly 600 million people who experience sleep paralysis.
There are certain things that disrupt sleep patterns: emotional or mental stress, PTSD, some medications. They'll affect both systems. And anytime you're knocking the systems out of whack, you can end up with one of these nightmares.
This then begs the question, are we creating our own monsters?
For many, the notion that these daunting experiences are nothing more than a dream, a figment of a disturbed psyche, is simply inconceivable.
This assumption fails to answer one major conundrum. Why do so many cases of sleep paralysis include a violent interaction with an insidious entity?
We have a modern example of a case that is still puzzling scientists to this day, and these are the Hmong men who came to America in the wake of the war in Vietnam.
In the 1970s and 80s, a nightmare epidemic gripped a wave of Southeast Asian refugees who had fled to America, the majority of whom were young men of Laotian Hmong ethnicity.
Many were recruited by the United States from the country of Laos to fight on their side during the war. After the United States pulled out, they fled the country, many of them heading for the United States.
For some, finding refuge abroad is only possible while awake, as sleep holds a terrifying fate. Within this migration, a haunting trend emerges. Over 100 healthy Hmong refugees inexplicably perish during the night. Most are young men with an average age of 33, and all had spent less than 2 years in America.
It didn't seem like these young men who were dying had underlying health problems. There didn't appear to be environmental factors, and people couldn't figure out what was going on.
The condition eventually earns the name SUNS, Sudden Unexpected Nocturnal Death Syndrome.
Years later, Shelley Adler, a professor of integrative medicine at the University of California, decides to investigate the medical mystery herself. Her interviews with members of the Hmong community reveal a grim clue.
What she discovered was what they had in common was a shared culture in which a profound belief in these spirits, including the Dacha, had a prominent role in shaping their lives and their sense of well-being. And the Dacha was an evil spirit that they believed came into their dreams, and it punished them when they were not performing their spiritual duties.
They are cut off from their religious leaders, from their shaman, who could offer them protection from the evil spirit. And so you had these Hmong men who were suffering appalling night terror and sleep paralysis and believing that this spirit was in the room with them, punishing them.
The Dacho shares striking similarities with other night visitors around the world.
Why is Dacho worse than the others, worse than Jinn or the old hag? In that it's not only able to produce fear, but sometimes death.
Adler proposes a controversial conclusion. The Hmong men who died in America had no clear path of escape from the finality of their belief, and thus succumbed, in a sense, to the curse of their own nightmare.
She suggests that maybe there is an underlying genetic cause, but on the cardiac side, and that it's really the sleep paralysis, the panic, the lack of that spiritual support and protections that are then leading to cardiac events while they sleep.
The story of the Hmong men teaches us about fear more than anything else.
The nightmare, whether a twisted hallucination or a wicked being from beyond, feeds on fear. The more we shiver and scream, the more its power swells.
These are very, very stressed people much of the time, and not getting proper sleep and being terrified of going to sleep is going to add to that.
Studies show that people that actually fear sleep paralysis are more likely to suffer from it.
In the case of sleep paralysis, that fear of being vulnerable at night can build on itself. And so today, doctors are recommending all different kinds of strategies to manage our fear.
Many people use meditation, mantras, and visualizations to shield themselves from the horrifying night visitor.
Next time the night demon slithers down the hall, jumps up on you, presses your chest, and tries to squeeze out the life from you, kill it by keeping calm.
A farmer makes his way through the grassy woodlands of southern Sweden in search of fertile land to call his own. Nestled between the bountiful sea and the dense coniferous forests, he appears to have stumbled upon the perfect plot. But something stands in his way. There, protruding from the sunlit meadow, are 3 behemoth stones, oddly situated in a triangular formation. Standing at a menacing 14 feet tall, they appear far too obtrusive, and the farmer decides they will have to be removed.
These aren't just ordinary stones or boulders. These stones are believed to hold ancient magic, sorcery, so they have a kind of power built into them.
Upon entering their shadow, he notices one has been roughly marked with an archaic inscription and brushes his hands across the cryptic symbols. Whatever it reads, he will never know, but what it promises, he will soon tragically discover.
For centuries, people have been careful to not get too close. Touching the stone is one thing, but trying to remove it could spell disaster.
The carved slab is a rare relic from Iron Age Sweden, likely inscribed by the North Germanic ancestors of the renowned seafaring Vikings.
2nd and 3rd century, we start to see these symbols appear. It's much like an Egyptian hieroglyph, because for the most part, Scandinavian and Proto-Germanic culture did not write anything down. It's oral tradition. Very few people knew how to write it, and even less people knew how to read it.
Piecing together messages carved on scraps of bone, metal, bark, and stone, historians have been able to paint a vague picture of ancient life in the European North. Many of these stories are scribbled in a long-forgotten text known as runes.
These are a series of angular lines which depict sounds and ideas in the Germanic language.
The rune actually comes from this idea of the occult, the secret, and it's meant to be hidden. It's meant to be used in ceremonial purposes. So we have to understand these as having some kind of cosmological or mystical purpose.
According to Norse mythology, runes were gifted to the pagan god Odin in his relentless quest for infinite wisdom. Odin's insatiable desire for knowledge brings him to the tree of Yggdrasil, a cosmic structure that grows from the divine source of power. The broad trunk of Yggdrasil is embellished with runic characters that are believed to spell the fate of every being in the universe.
From bigger powers outside him, Odin receives the runes in exchange for sacrifices.
Yearning to access the secrets these runes contain, Odin pierces himself with a spear and hangs his maimed body from the tree in a display of ultimate devotion. He refuses food and water for 9 days and 9 nights, until finally, at long last, the sacred symbols unveil their significance.
Ancient Nordic peoples believed that runes inherently contained the power of the gods, so even etching them into stone unleashed the tremendous power.
We not only find them obviously on these rune stones, but also on amulets, on the doorways of going to a house, which means that they probably had a protective role.
Runestones seem to mark things as simple as the boundaries of land. We also see them being used to memorialize someone who's died, very often someone important. We also see them being used occasionally to articulate certain types of magic.
Decorated with divine symbols and brushed in coloured dyes, these signs were often placed in public areas by roads and waterways, where they could be seen and read by all.
The Vikings brought this practice of the runestone to various parts of the world, including the British Isles, on their various expeditions. Most runestones, however, can be found in the motherland of Scandinavia.
The majority of these Nordic monuments, around 2,500, have been uncovered in Sweden. More than half have been moved from their original position, but some are wisely left untouched. Looming over the forest glades of Blekinge County in southern Sweden is a mysterious monolith that has withstood the test of time. Known as the Bjärketorp runestone, named after a farm that is close by, this mammoth structure has been the subject of superstition for over 1,500 years.
This is among the tallest runestones ever found, standing at an incredible 14 feet.
The Björketorp stones consists of these 3 stones, creating this triangular formation, but only one of them contains a curse.
Bearing no memorial, nor even a name, the face of the Bjärketorp runestone shares nothing more than 6 lines of text, declaring an ominous threat. I, master of the runes, conceal here runes of power. Incessantly plagued by maleficence, doomed to insidious death is he who breaks this monument. I prophesy destruction. I predict perdition.
The key line in this runic script is the incredibly ominous, I predict perdition. Well, perdition means eternal damnation of your soul. Who inscribed this curse, and why did they do it?
This isn't the only runed stone bearing an ominous prophecy. In fact, a number of other stones have been shown engraved with similar messages.
Around 900 AD, a grieving widow in Denmark chisels 210 runic symbols into a slab of stone. She intends this to be a memorial for her deceased husband, who is thought to have been a priest or high chieftain. It will become one of the longest runic inscriptions found in the country, and will go on to survive centuries of history, perhaps because of the jinx she stamps into its base. A warlock be he who damages this stone or drags it in memory of another.
Warlock, in that sense, that language, is about being against the community. You are a threat to order.
Deciphering these ancient symbols correctly has proved no easy task.
Runic alphabet is commonly now called Futhark, and there are slightly more modern versions of it, and the Bjarkatorp stone is written in the older version, or what we now call the Elder Futhark.
After largely falling out of use by the Middle Ages, Elder Futhark left an air of mystery in its wake. It wasn't until the mid-1800s that scholars rediscovered just how to translate this runic text, allowing them to unlock forgotten secrets that had laid dormant for centuries.
This runestone has been interpreted by several scholars, so its exact translation is still unknown.
There are slight variations in what it reads, but all of them have in common the fact that the central message is foretelling doom.
What these translations fail to reveal, however, are two key elements of this runestone story. Bjarkatorp's engraving contains no clues as to its purpose, nor its scribe.
And the questions remain: who etched the message, and what were they hoping to protect?
Some offered the simple suggestion that it was a border marker between the Swedes and the Danes.
But it may also have been a shrine to the Norse gods.
The size of these stones and the apparently deliberate placement of them suggests something more than just kind of randomly finding some stones and carving marks on them. These look like they were deliberately positioned. They're positioned in a triangle, so in a particular geometric shape that people often associate with religious significance and spiritual significance.
Though no scholarly consensus has been reached, one of the rune symbols is the triangular Valknut symbol, which is most often associated with death, the afterlife, and the Norse god Odin.
Some interpret this shape with its 9 points to be symbolic of the 9 worlds of Norse mythology. The intersection of the 3 triangles may suggest this connection between the gods, the humans, and the underworld.
The symbol of the Valknut actually is associated with Odin as well, not only of the 3 triangles, but of this sort of interweaving of tapestry, so that knowledge, in fact, is many, many strands that is interwoven together to create this unified source of power.
If this is true, could ignoring the inscribed curse beckon punishment from the gods?
As for the Bjarkatorp formation, its message was ignored. For the farmer in the Middle Ages who stumbled upon the giant rocks, they are an eyesore, and more importantly, a barrier for his work. So he devises a plan to demolish the slabs.
In order to get rid of the stones, he would have to do so with a common method called fire setting.
By lighting a fire around the perimeter of a large stone and heating that stone up, and then pouring cold water on top of it will crack the stone. So this is what this farmer has the thought of doing.
The man gathers his materials on a calm, warm day. Beneath the blue skies, there is not a whisper of wind in the air. Small twigs catch the first of his flame, and the fire slowly crackles to life beneath these ancient stones. The man sits back, waiting for the heat to consume Bjarkatorp's imposing frame, when suddenly a freak gust of wind rushes across the clearing.
The wind blows, kicks up the fire. He gets his clothes get caught on fire.
He desperately attempts to douse the blaze, but in the shadow of Bjarkatorp succumbs to an agonizing death. As his lifeless corpse lies burning in the grass, the inferno beneath the runestones is snuffed by an unseen force.
Could this have been the Bjarkatorp curse at work?
Some runologists ponder whether this pillar of the past perhaps marks the resting place of a dignified figure.
It is possible that Bjarkatorp was intended to mark a grave.
What we've seen in other cultures, like in Egypt, is that the curses that are inscribed on tombs are because they didn't want the bodies to be disturbed.
In 1914, Swedish archaeologist T.J. Arn decides to put this theory to the test, leading a risky excavation of the Bjarkatorp grounds. His team delicately probes the earth, but uncovers not a single human remain.
Arne carries out excavations around the ruined stone, but he's careful not to dig underneath it.
Arne keeps his distance from the prophetic stone, ensuring he does not dare damage the fragile artifact and thus provoke its spell.
He didn't find any evidence. Does it mean that it wasn't a gravesite? Because it wasn't necessarily the practice of the Germanic peoples to put memorial stones on top of actual gravesites. They could have it anywhere that was public.
Yet regardless of its purpose, few have dared to test the stone's foreboding note. And as made clear by the legend of the local farmer, those that have would not live to tell the tale. Today, the mystery of the Bjerketorp runestone remains, and according to many, so too do its deadly powers.
These symbols are very magical. They help us understand a culture.
Although Bjerketorp joins the many runestones that have faded to time, great efforts have been made to protect these majestic markers of our magical past.
Every year, the runestones of Scandinavia are cleaned and maintained so that they can be enjoyed by new generations. And when it comes to the Bjerketorp runestone, conservators have to have a steady hand, lest a slip spells disaster.